What's up, everybody? Welcome to the channel. OG here, and I wanted to talk to you about post-patch attacking. Depending on how well you know the game will decide how much of a difference you see in the attack, because there is quite a bit of difference that changes, maybe for some their tactics, but definitely changes the players that you want to go after. Now, one thing that doesn't change is that this year, more than any other year, there is a wide variety of players you can choose where overall stats don't mean as much. It's more about the body type, the way the player feels on the pitch. Right now, I have Pires, an 87 rated left wing. He does great post patch because he has long strides. He's 6'2", despite being as big as he is. He's not exactly a physical specimen, but he does have great touches on the ball for how big he is. And right now, with the sharp cuts being prominent, if you don't know what I mean, you're tapping L1 and R1 as you're flicking your left stick, cutting back and forth. That sort of makes up for the nerfed R1 dribbling or technical dribbling. He does great at that. A lot of players do great at that, but then there's some that don't. Now, the reason why the bigger, more physical players are doing well in this meta is because defending is buffed. Tackles are coming in more prominently, and those bigger, more physical players can shrug off tackles easier. So you're going to want players such as Rodgers, who in these first few games I don't have in. I actually spent the coins to get my one untradeable player, who was Puteas. And then I thought about trying Bonmonti. I'm still going to try her eventually, but I went back to Rodgers just to see the difference. And honestly, they're both amazing. You'll see a lot of Puteas involvement in these goals and these highlights. But once I put Rodgers in, you'll see a lot where he's involved too. I had Puteas on Shadow Striker with no role plus or plus plus, and Rodgers with the Playmaker plus plus. And they both have their benefits. A lot of it's going to be dependent on where you want your cam. But the most important thing to take away from this is that I think it's important to have a cam in the post-patch meta. Why is that? Because a lot of your attack is going to come through the wings. Since tackling and defenders are buffed, you want to attack up the wings, right, where you're away from defenders, and then pull them away from that space in the center, right, with your wingers. Then you play it into the center for goals, and guess who's going to be there mostly? Your cams, your strikers as well, but a lot of times they're almost decoys. So if you have a good cam with good movement, good positioning especially, which you're going to see in a lot of these highlights, that working up the wing then playing into the middle, whether it's a traditional cutback or just, going outside and then working in, even if it's a little bit before the inline. Typical cutbacks, right? You drive the inline, you lay it across for a tap in. Not all of these goals are like that. Sometimes you're just pulling the defenders out wide, working it in. Then that cam still has to do a little bit of work, but they have more space now that you pulled those defenders out wide, right? It's a little bit different than a traditional cutback. Either way, the cam is very important. So whether you go with a Puteas with no roll plus or plus plus and players like a Shadow Striker, like what you see me do in these highlights, that's what she's playing, or you go with Rodgers, who is a Playmaker plus plus, and he's always in great positioning, right? I'd say the biggest difference is he's a little bit more withheld. He's not always making those darting runs forward, but I'll tell you, he's always in a place to get the ball, whether it's just to receive and lay it off or receive it to score a goal himself. So very important. That's why I went from the 4-5-1 flat back to the 4-2-3-1, because I wanted that cam, right? And that brings up another big difference, which is prior to the patch, 4-2-1-3 was the most dominant setup because of the positioning, right? Those wingers being a little bit inside in those seams between the center backs and the wing backs. That's where you wanted them. Now, with the defending being buffed, it's better to have those wingers more wide. 4-2-3-1 wide, they're playing left and right mid. I still have, for instance, Hansen, who I packed, untradeable, my biggest pack pull so far, just a side note. She plays inside forward, but then Pires has, wide playmaker plus plus. So his movement is a little bit more staying out wide, then coming in, as opposed to Hansen's always looking to dart inside. Either way, they're both starting wider, and that helps because you can manually position them wider a lot of times, which is what you want to pull the defenders out in this new meta, as opposed to when they were just constantly running in before as inside forwards. You wanted them in those seams because then they could get the ball even if they're close to a defender, and they have the upper hand to, juke out and get in on goal, juke out the defenders and get in on goal. Now, the defenders, more often than not, no matter how good your attackers are, they're going to win the ball. It's just how it's going. You could be dominating a team right now, but you get right up by the goal, and that defender, whether it's AI or user controlled, is many times winning the tackles. That's why you have to put yourself in the best chance to have an opening to shoot, which is why you pull the defenders out with a wider setup and then move the ball in, right? So, again, just to reiterate why this is so important, you want more space in the middle so the defenders can't, get in and tackle you now that they have buffed up abilities to tackle. And you want to have a cam there so that when you get the ball out wide, then put it into the box, you have a well-positioned player to finish the ball off or receive the ball and then do what they need to do in the more open space now that you pull the defenders wider in your 4-2-3-1 wide, even if you still like the 4-5-1, whatever it is, you're pulling the defenders wide. Now you play it into the center. You need to have a good finishing cam, or at least a cam that can do work in there and get it to your striker to finish off. Either way. But every position's important, of course. I would just say, but previously, your wingers and striker being the most important. Now, I would say your cam's the most important, followed by your wingers, right? Your striker's still going to score goals, as you see here, but your wingers have to do the job of pulling the defenders out wide and then keeping the ball and being able to play a good pass in to the center, or sometimes even take the ball out wide and bring it in themselves and score goals, right? So the wingers are important for that reason. And then your cam is the one who's going to be coming in late and who is going to be open most of the time to get that ball in the middle to either finish off or then find your striker, right? Whereas prior to that, in the 4-2-1-3, which was, again, the most powerful setup, you would be able to slot the ball into your wingers or striker directly. They could shimmy left and right until they get an open shot and finish it off that way. So that is the biggest difference in the attack. If you need players on a budget, the good news is now, again, I'll repeat, more than ever, you don't necessarily need to go for that one meta cam, those certain meta wingers. The more shifty players can still work out. It's just, again, on dribbling, you're using your left stick, you're tapping L1 and R1 to cut back and forth instead of using, technical dribbling. And then you can go for the shifty, smaller, like Claudia is still very good as a striker. The only reason, like I said, I like the bigger, more physical players, like the difference between Rogers and Putellas, is in certain scenarios where Putellas would lose the ball because the defense is buffed up, right? Rogers, I simply hold the shield button, L2, and he's got Enforcer. So that little difference would allow him to hold off the defender and keep the ball, as opposed to getting dispossessed of the ball. And one final importance, especially in post-patch gameplay, is a good box crashing CDM. If you're playing a 4-2-3-1, for instance, or a setup with CDMs. If you're playing, let's say, a 4-5-1 flat, a box crashing CM. So this is so important because you need that extra run in to take the pressure, with the defense being buffed, off of your typical attackers, right? And sometimes, as you see in these highlights, your CDM or CM will score the goals because they aren't marked, right? Those deep runs will be open. They can run through and get a goal. Even if it's just as a decoy, though, you need that extra run in. So let's say you're playing two CDMs. You have one as a holding CDM, like I have Mainu, who does a great job. But even him, sometimes I'll manually trigger him to make a run forward. And then my other CDM will cover. Now, I had an actual box crasher. A Camavinga evolved, so he had a box crasher ++ on him, and he made great runs. But he just isn't as good offensively as, for example, Williams, who's a severely underrated hero. She's got great stats, great attacking ability with decent defense. So I have her on deep line playmaker. She has that as a ++ as a CDM, right? And as a CM, she has playmaker ++. But as a CDM, Deep Line Playmaker Plus Plus, I just have to manually trigger her more than, say, Camavinga as a Box Crasher Plus Plus. Now you could even go 2 holding CDMs, right? And then manually trigger whichever one, and you always know there's one that's going to be holding cover. But if you do that, you have to be really good at manually triggering runs, because I'm telling you, if you do not have that extra midfielder running in, even just as a decoy, it will make it significantly more difficult to score goals. So I strongly suggest you either A, have a box crasher or at least a deep line playmaker, or B, if you're really good at triggering runs, you make sure you're always triggering one of your CDMs to join the attack. And yes, they will recover, right? The recovery this year for all defensive players is very good, which is a big reason why I like using wingbacks like Charles and Van Pastor, because they're very good defensively, especially Charles. And Van Pastor, while she's very good defensively, she is excellent getting out the field. So as much as I can, I get her going forward. It's just based on how the gameplay is, you have to use fullback and balance, because if you use, for instance, wingback, attacking wingback, anything, if your wingbacks are out of position, the opponent can easily counterattack you. Even though the recovery is good, right, you will get exposed if you use anything but fullback and manually triggering those wingbacks. So that's why I didn't talk about them in terms of joining the attack, because you have to do that at your own risk. And it's the exact same thing with center backs, right? You have to use defender defend, because anything else, you just leave yourself exposed. Some of the positioning of those other roles for center back and wing back can work out great until you lose the ball and you get counterattacked with a huge hole in your defense. So that's what needs to be fixed if those other roles are going to be usable in the future. So let's hope EA Sports can figure something out with that. But that is everything you need to know for the post-patch attack. Let me know in the comments section if this video was helpful, and if so, please smash that like button. Also, if you haven't, please subscribe to the channel, and if you'd like, check out my YouTube bio. There's tons of ways you could support the channel, including merch, memberships. I have a Discord that gives help on everything under the sun within FC26 and beyond, right? We talk other football games too. Not to mention, there's YouTube memberships. You can get content ASAP, no waiting at all. So the merch, as crazy as it sounds, is the same exact material that you would get at Gucci, Prada, anything. There's a company that has all of the best materials. It's just with the classic OG logo instead of that Prada or Gucci or whatever. So get the best materials without paying hundreds and thousands of dollars. With that said, keep grinding, keep having fun, and I will see you on the next one. Peace out.